So I just wanted to talk about space. Really, it's a subject that I've been quite interested in since I was in my mid-teens. Although I'm hardly I wouldn't say I was a space enthusiast as such, but I'm certainly someone that's very curious about space and the potential for what lies ahead for our own species in the coming decades, and certainly in the coming centuries, as we become what I assume is going to happen is that we're essentially going to become a kind of biotech based species as more and more technology develops, and obviously with AI and robotics advancing all the time. And it's clear to me at least that's the kind of probably the direction we're heading towards. And so really this video is not just going to be about space in and of itself, but also kind of the sort of the sort of existential crisis that kind of comes with it in a way. How many of us looked up at the sky at night and asked the same question, is there anything out there? Is there that age-old question of, are we alone in the universe? And you look up at the sky at night and you think, there's got to be something out there. There must be something. But once you start researching, once you start looking into the complexities of how life evolved on Earth, that's if we have to take a kind of Earth-centric based approach to the possibility of life existing out there on other planets. That's not to say that other planets necessarily have to be like Earth, but of course we only have one frame of reference as yet for how life can get going and how life can specific types of evolution, how singular cell organisms can go to multicellular organisms, and obviously from simple microorganisms to like things like basic things like bacteria or whatever, to more complex forms of life. That process is so unbelievably complex, and it's akin to kind of throwing a certain number of dice, hoping you're going to get a certain number. Or it's kind of partly, yes, of course it is the physics and nature of the universe playing itself out, but it's also kind of, you could almost say we're a kind of potentially a kind of fluke species, maybe even a fluke planet, possibly. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't other exoplanets out there that have life on them. But it just might just be that. I think my point is that I think if life does exist out there, and I suspect it probably does, whether that's just really basic, simple forms of life, or whether I suspect probably what we will find out eventually over enough time, say over a century or two, as telescopes develop and get better, and our detection of biosignatures and tech signatures, or whatever I call them. As we advance with probes and things like that, and we can send small probes out further into our solar system, and to more or less to the edge of our solar system, and possibly beyond it at some point in the coming decades. We will have at least a bit of a clearer picture what potentially the reality might be out there. But of course, ultimately we aren't going to have a definitive answer until we can get to a point where we can really get close to these exoplanets that have been found by telescopes like the Kepler JWST, I think it's called. I think TESS as well is another one. Really, even with the exoplanets that have been found, there's only really been a handful of them that hold some kind of potential, possibly as being candidates for habitabilities. We don't really know for certain. So there's hope, at least, that obviously some of those exoplanets are tens or hundreds of light years away, so we're certainly not going to be getting to them anytime soon, as in directly imaging them or anything like that. It's not going to happen. I don't think it's probably going to happen in my lifetime. Say besides, the very, very, the closest of exoplanets that are just a few light years away. Perhaps, I think the nearest star system, I think NASA has some kind of a mission to send I think they call it a light sail probe there at some point. In a few decades from now, apparently it's going to take about 20 years to get to that. I think they call it Proxima Centauri or something like that. If I'm not mistaken, I might be wrong. But basically, there's an exoplanet there that potentially has life on it. So we don't know. It's probably unlikely that it has any kind of complex life on it. Maybe it has some kind of very simple life, possibly bacteria or something like that. We don't really know. But that's essentially that in my lifetime, whether that's 50 years from now, 40, 50, 60 years, that'll probably happen in my lifetime. So I may one day be lucky enough to live long enough that we can answer that question. Is there any life out there in the universe? It'll either be yes, no, or it's very complicated. It's not so easy. We don't really know for sure. I'm sure there's loads of planets out there that have very simple forms of life, but they just never evolved into anything complex, like animals, plants, trees, even fungi and things like that, probably. But who knows? We just don't know. We just don't have the technology at the moment to know for sure. But from everything I've researched about exoplanets and how many there could be just within the Milky Way galaxy alone, even if we just say that, let's say 1 to 2% of all of those planets, exoplanets, that have been deemed to be possible potential planets for life, have some kind of life on them, that's still a good outcome. Even if we just say in the Milky Way galaxy, let's say there's only a few thousand planets. The Milky Way galaxy has billions of planets in it. So if we even just find a few hundred or a few thousand planets that have developed life on them, that would be an amazing, groundbreaking thing. Now imagine you wake up one morning and you see the news and have discovered that there's life on the nearest, the very nearest exoplanets to us. Okay, yes, it takes decades to get there, and humans will never probably land on those planets, but at least we will know at that point, yes, there's life. We will probably be the first generation to know the answer to that question. And I suspect the answer will be yes, but it's complicated. I think what we'll probably find is that things like very simple organisms, bacteria, things like that will be quite common across most exoplanets, probably. Probably what we'll find is that complex life is rarer, but it's still quite prevalent. It's not as rare as we thought. And as far as intelligent life goes, or aliens, or whatever you want to call them, advanced species, they will probably be even rarer, but I suspect they probably do exist. You know, the thing is, I think we have to be careful about how we approach it. We can't just say that, you know, that life has to be exactly as it is on Earth. Of course, there are certain natural processes and physical processes that will be common across the entirety of the universe, probably anyway. But, you know, nature's very resilient, and nature can, you know, when you think about so many of the species on Earth, things can survive in the hottest, the coldest, the most dangerous of environments. And I don't know why, I don't see why that couldn't possibly happen on other planets. You know, I think we have this very overly egotistical approach to life. You know, well, you know, Earth's special, Earth is unique, and it could very well be the case. It may be. It might be that Earth is the only planet in the entire universe that has had a species develop intelligence, tool making, technology, understanding science, maths, everything like that. Possibly. But if I had to put money on it, I'd say that we're not actually that unique. It might be the case that there are other kind of human-like species out there on other planets somewhere in far-off galaxies. I'd say that it's possible. Is it likely? I mean, I don't know. We just don't know right now. Nobody has the answers, because we just can't. We just don't have the technology. We just don't know. You know, at the moment, you know, the best answer that astrobiologists and astrophysicists and people like that, and you know, the people that have really clued up on exoplanets and things like that, you know, the best we can say is we just don't know. The answer's probably going to be, it's not going to be simple, because I think that whatever life is out there in the universe, it'll be a combination of different things. It's not this kind of black or white situation. It's going to be something that's, there'll be all sorts of different, if life is out there, let's just assume that it is. Let's just play devil's advocate. Let's just say that yes, life exists, complex life exists, potentially even advanced, intelligent species are out there. Then I suspect there'll be different forms of them. There'll be different types of those things. It won't just be, you know, I think we have to get away from this kind of movie-based kind of, you know, this very kind of stereotypical vision of what life might be like out there. It might look absolutely nothing like us, and I suspect it probably won't for the most part. If there are human-like species, they'll be probably very, very different for all sorts of different reasons, because of their own very unique evolutionary path and their own, obviously, the unique characteristics of that planet. You know, I think if we're expecting to find a human, you know, Homo sapiens 2.0, then I think we're kind of, I mean, it's possible, I suppose. It is possible, but it'll be extremely, extremely rare. I don't think, I mean, who knows? Who knows for sure? But I doubt it. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there are other advanced, complex forms of life out there. But I think if we're expecting them to have cars and, you know, kind of an industrial revolution of sorts, or some kind of pathway that we've had on Earth, I don't know. I don't think, you know, it's already an extremely big ask for life to happen anywhere, for the conditions for life to happen on a planet. And then you've got to think about the conditions that are needed to get life kick-started to things that we would recognise as life forms, more complex forms of life. That's a massive ask as well. And then you've got to take into consideration all of the threats that can come in from the planet itself, its climate, its environment, solar flares, radiation, comets, asteroids. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but I think of course, when you look at the universe and you think that there are trillions, potentially trillions and trillions of galaxies out there in the universe, then yeah, of course, from a statistical point of view, you would expect that at least a handful of some of those galaxies would have at least one advanced, more complex, a much more advanced species. So I suspect there probably are out there, but I don't think they're going to be common. But of course, when you're talking about a universe that has trillions and trillions of just galaxies alone, let alone planets, then you could say, there probably are out there, but they're going to be too far away for us to ever communicate with, to ever get to. Because even traveling at the speed of light, which is something that at the moment is completely impossible, it would still take you. Even the nearest exoplanets, it would take you thousands of years to get to them, and that's our closest. That's one of the closest solar systems to ours. So if it's the case that civilizations do exist, possibly in the Milky Way, or possibly in some kind of galactic neighborhood galaxy, or somewhere not too far away, even if it's in our own galaxy, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in my lifetime. I can guarantee you that. There's just no way. I just don't see it. It's like, I think the best we can hope for is that we someday we can gather enough data from biosignatures, tech signatures, from future space probes, from future telescopes, that give us a kind of clue, give us a much better potential view of what might be out there. Give us an idea of whether it increases the odds or not that there's life out there. I suspect life will be out there if we look for long enough and look deep enough, and we have the right technology, and we just don't give in. I think we will find it. But it could be that it ends up being incredibly disappointing, or it could be extremely dangerous, or it could result in it being something that we just don't recognise. We don't see it as life, because to us, life is what we see on our planet. What we see, what we've learnt about, what we see in documentaries and in videos, and that's life to us. So certainly in my lifetime, I'm gonna see probably some kind of a colony set up on, or some kind of a base set up on the moon. That's certainly going to happen at some stage, probably in the next maybe 30 to 40 years, I reckon, maybe sooner. And before that, we will see unmanned missions to places like Europa and Titan, for example. These moons that have got subsurface oceans, massive thick layer of ice. I think it's like quite a few kilometers deep apparently. You know, who knows what's lurking on those moons? You know, it could be that there's nothing there, but they are our best bets for the time being. There's certainly nothing on Mars, well, it doesn't appear to be anywhere. But who knows what discoveries will come about from Mars in the coming years. Not that there'll be anything of significance, but it could tell us a lot about our solar system's history. So I'm kind of excited about especially the Europa mission, because that's coming. I think that's coming first. I think that's supposed to. I think it's already on its way to Europa. I think it's supposed to arrive there. I don't know if it's in 2030, I think. Well, it's not too far away. And also exciting is there's some new telescopes, much more powerful, smarter, more versatile, much more advanced telescopes that are gonna be put into service coming in the next 5 to 10 years. So that's exciting as well. And of course, every few months or every few years, we're gonna learn about more exoplanets, and so there's reasons to be hopeful that life out. That there is life out there in space, and I just, my gut instinct tells me that, not that you can always go off your intuition, but I just think that, I mean, look, it's either that it could there's so many different hypotheses and theories about space. There's things like the dark forest, there's things like the rare earth hypothesis, there's obviously the Fermi paradox and things like that. But I think, I just, my gut instinct is that life is out there, or in various different forms. It might be rare, but rare in the when you frame it in, when you look at it, like I said, based on the fact that there are trillions and trillions and trillions of planets, at least a few million or possibly a few billion exoplanets out there, if not more, and some of them will probably have been lucky enough to have had the right conditions for long enough for life to get going, and probably for it to evolve and to develop into more advanced forms of life. I think I would say the odds are good. I'd say that there is a high probability that life of different types, some probably very strange, very, very, very alien, very weird to us, probably do exist. And that is something that it's kind of, it's unsettling, it's eerie, it's frightening actually, in a way, because what are we going to discover over the course of within a few centuries? We're probably going to get very close to some of these exoplanets that we've discovered. Eventually, or at least over a few thousand years, we will. It will happen eventually. If we don't wipe ourselves out through nuclear war, or some asteroid causes our extinction, or we cause our own extinction through climate change that just makes life impossible on our planet for us as a species. I think the thing is that we have to realize that we're an extremely vulnerable species, and then that's the thing you have to think about space, is that life is extremely vulnerable. So many things there's so many conditions that have to be met. There's so many variables, there's so many things that can go wrong, that can wipe a species out in a blink of an eye. You just think about Earth for a moment, like 99.9% of all the species that have ever lived on this planet are extinct, they're gone. Because of, obviously one of the major, most incredible species that's ever lived on the planet, the dinosaurs, got wiped out by an asteroid, and they were around for a few million years. And obviously we've had various issues with ice ages and things like that, the climate changing over time, and certain species becoming extinct because they no longer have, the climate's changed to become too hot, too cold. Certain food sources that they relied on became extinct, etc., etc. Earth's had an incredible but extremely vulnerable history, but somehow it's managed to make it through. And who's to say that's the common? Who's to say that's what happens on all the other exoplanets? It may very well not be the case. It might be that Earth is just one of those lucky but unlucky planets. Because if there are other planets out there where the conditions have been right for life to get kick-started, and then for it to evolve over millions and millions of years, and there haven't been as many threats to that planet for whatever reasons, probably because of its specific type of sun, just where it is in the galaxy, etc., etc. It may be the case that some other planets out there, exoplanets, are actually better suited for life, and actually some certain species may have evolved a lot faster, and we just don't know. So we can't say that it's a closed book, just because we haven't found any. We haven't really found any concrete evidence yet, any empirical evidence of life being out there beyond our own solar system. It's likely. This isn't what my gut instinct is on it. I think that it exists, but I think that it may be the case that within, let's say, one in every few hundred or every few thousand, or potentially even one in every few million galaxies has maybe one or two planets that goes on to develop complex, advanced, intelligent life. And it could be like one in every few billion planets that goes on to develop some kind of a civilization. If but that depends. I think we take an approach to this that might not be. I think we might be going around it in the wrong way. It's maybe, you think about it on Earth, and how many species on Earth right now have developed tools, technology, and have become super knowledgeable, super intelligent. One. So that alone shows you how difficult it is, and how massively specific and selective natural selection is, and even the incredible demands of evolution, and specific types of evolution as well. But that doesn't mean that it's not out there. It just means that it's just, that, like I said before, like I said at the start of this, the dice have to be rolled a certain number of ways, a certain number of times, over a certain period of time, for very specific things to happen, for a species to maintain longevity, for that species to survive long enough so that it can evolve further. And it might, it may very well be the case that it might not be in the best interest for space, for most life in space, to go on to develop, to go on to evolve, because there's no need for it, really. It's not like. I mean, obviously, we hope that's happened, and like I said, I'm pretty confident that it has happened. But I mean, even if there are alien species out there, they're probably far too. Even if there was one on the other side of our galaxy, at the moment, even within the next few decades, it's just an impossibility. It's not going to happen. We're not going to get to it. We might not even be able to truly recognise it even if it was up close to it, might not even really truly realise that it's an alien species, because we don't really know what we're looking for, really, in a way. It's like we know what life exists on our planet, but we don't know the specific chemistry, the biology that might have happened on other worlds, because of there's so many different factors, the potential, radiation levels, gravity, whether it's tidally locked or not. Like I said, whether depending on what type of star it is, where it is in the galaxy, probably as well. Obviously I'm no astrobiologist or physicist or astronomer or anything like that, so I don't know all of the terminology and all the nuances of all the specific aspects of it. But having done a little bit of research on it, I know that it's hard for life to get going, and it takes a very, very long time, and it's even harder for life to evolve into complex life forms. So it's a massive ask for us to. Certainly, it's a massive ask for us to expect that there'll be some kind of Earth 2.0 out there, or at least, if we're expecting to find, a few million Earths, like, more or less clones to our own planet, then, I mean, it's possible, but I don't know. That's the best thing I can say, is that I don't know. Yeah, they probably do exist, but they'll probably number into the hundreds across maybe a few thousand across the entire galaxy, and obviously in the whole universe, whatever that is, because we only know for the moment what makes up the observable universe, so we don't know the entire picture. But it appears at least there's probably more than. It could very well be more than 10 trillion galaxies across, probably even far more than that, across the entire universe. So, and obviously each galaxy will have billions and billions of planets in it, and certainly a few thousand exoplanets, if not more. So, when you look at it from the statistical point of view, it seems more likely. But then when you start delving into the complexities of chemistry, the complexities of biology and evolution, and the threats to life, you start to become doubtful. You start to become kind of get into this headspace of existential dread, really. Because look, my gut instinct, like I said, I personally believe that complex life, maybe advanced intelligent life, is probably out there somewhere. I suspect it will be, but it might be very, 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 very rare. But like I said, rare in a universe with trillions and trillions and trillions of planets is not that rare, but you know what I mean. But even if it turns out to be actually more common, but much more strange than we could have imagined, and that life is a lot more resilient than we currently think, for all sorts of reasons, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're gonna recognize it or find it that quickly. It's so incredibly complicated, to even just to study the app, but obviously just studying the dimming of the light as a planet goes around its specific star, and that in itself, that can lead to all sorts of complications and misunderstandings. So then, of course, you've got the added complications of trying to understand a planet's atmosphere and the chemical makeup of it and so forth. It can be misleading. It's not always the case just because a planet is in the right space around its star, or it might have the right chemical groups in terms of its atmosphere, or whatever. Doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be life on it. There's more of a chance of it having life on it, but it could just be something very simple. It might not be nothing of any. There's nothing particularly fascinating about it, probably. And I suspect that for the first couple of decades, that's probably what we'll end up finding. It'll just be a case of, the data tells us that yes, life is more common than we thought, but a lot of it's just single cell organisms, and nothing of really of any significance. But it would still tell us that at least it's possible for life to exist out there beyond our own solar system. And scientists are already kind of expecting that to be the case anyway. So that's not going to, even if that turns out to be the case, let's say if we find out 20, 30, 40 years from now, it's not going to be like massively groundbreaking. It will be for scientists, but in certain ways, because it gives us a new perspective on the universe and our own solar system and stuff. But really, we really want to be finding more complex forms of life, different types of, the weird and the wonderful kind of thing. And I think, at least as far as us studying exoplanet atmospheres, we probably will, within the coming decades, find some planets that may have more complex life on them based on or at least go up in our estimation as planets that are a lot more habitable than we initially thought. But who knows? In the short term, what the research is going to be on places like Europa. It could very well be that there's absolutely nothing on it, would be incredibly, disillusioned. It would be incredibly demoralising, depressing in a way. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there's nothing out there. It just means that it might be a lot harder than we thought. But again, we can't necessarily base everything on our own solar system. It may just be that we're in an unfortunate solar system, perhaps, or a difficult part of the galaxy, or a difficult type of galaxy, because the specific galaxy as well, it plays a massive part in habitability and forming and certain exoplanet types and things like that. So it's not simple like that. I don't think we're going to have, within a few decades, the leading scientists of the day in NASA and other space agencies and whatever, the best they'll be able to say is that yes, life is out there, but it's kind of vague. Our understanding of it's vague, and we don't know the full extent yet, and that's going to take probably a few centuries, really, if not. I suspect a few centuries before we kind of get to a point where we can start to say, with much more confidence that yes, life is out there. It's quite prevalent. Maybe not. It's rare, but it's rare, but it's a lot more prevalent than we used to think. Or it could be turn out to be that it's that they turn around and say actually life is a lot rarer than we initially thought because of X, Y, and Z. Or maybe we just don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody has an answer to that question. Are we alone in the universe? All we have is theories, hypotheses. All we have is assumptions, really. And all we can really go off is, really for the most part, is what we can study by way of things like radio waves and what we're mapping out through telescopes. Really, for the time being, in terms of extraterrestrial life, if it exists, there's all sorts of different thoughts on this. Some people just say that it's extremely, extremely unlikely. Some people say it's probably quite common. But again, it all really comes down to what your definition of life is, because, as I've said throughout this, it can take, obviously, like we know on Earth, it can take various different forms. So it's very difficult to say. It's very difficult to say. You know, for the leading experts, for the most intelligent minds, we just don't have an answer. That's the bottom line of it at the moment. We just do not have the answer to that question. Nobody knows for sure. You know, everyone has their own ideas about it. You know, we can sort of make deductions and, you know, sort of make some kind of educated guesses based on what we know, some sort of fundamental basic aspects of science on our own planet, etc., or, you know, based on our own understanding of our own solar system and its history, and you know, the formation of the Big Bang and the types of gases and types of you know, certain aspects of atmospheres that will need to be present, and obviously things like liquid water and sulfur, oxygen, hydrogen, methane, things like that, phosphorus and so forth. But, you know, ultimately we just don't know how common. It seems like those things are going to be out there, but, you know, it's one thing for even if, like, tomorrow we wake up and there's some breaking news and, you know, NASA's found some incredible, you know, research or whatever, it's found some candidate exoplanet, and they found that its atmosphere contains the right ingredients for, you know, for life to kind of flourish or whatever. You know, that the thing is as well, what we have to also consider is that even with our telescopes, we're not, you know, we're seeing things because of you know, the way that space works in terms of light and, you know, the speed of light and everything. Even if we, you know, the things that we're seeing, we're not seeing them as you know, the further things are, the further away celestial bodies are, galaxies, star systems, exoplanets, you know, we're not seeing them as they are now. We're seeing them as they were in the past, really. You know, it's like we're seeing them, you know, a long time, you know, because of the how long it takes for light to travel across the universe, you know, obviously. So, you know, what I'm trying to say is that even with our best efforts for the time being, we can't say, we cannot give, nobody can give an answer. Not, you know, even Brian Cox remains sort of kind of skeptical and a bit pessimistic about it, and he's got every right to be, and I understand that perspective, and I think that it's in this kind of very extremely complicated area of science, it's, you know, it's better to err on the side of caution and not to have too many expectations for a lot of the reasons I've explained throughout this. So, but you know, my gut instinct tells me that there's a good chance. There's reasons to be optimistic. You know, there's reasons to suspect that life is out there. To what extent, nobody knows. What kinds of life? Probably most of it will be simple life forms, but there'll be some more complex forms of life up there. Possibly some kind of intelligent, advanced, maybe some kind of civilizations, perhaps. But I mean, I just don't know. I'm in kind of two minds about it in that regard. I don't know. It's I suspect it could be out there. It could be. It could be. I just don't know. I really, I'm on the fence about that, to be honest, at the moment. As far as simple or more complex forms of life, I think they'll turn out to be probably quite rare, but there's no reason. I don't think we need to be completely pessimistic about it. But obviously we do need to err on the side of caution and kind of not place all our eggs in one basket, because but even if it's more common than we think, detection of these kind of worlds is still extremely, the technology we have is extremely primitive. Even if we found a civilization out there, how would we communicate with it? If it turns out that there's one in every few thousand, every few million galaxies, they might as well not be there. They might as well not exist, because there's far, far too out there for us ever to get to. Even communication with such a civilization, well, one, it'd be pointless, really, because how would you? Unless you had some kind of super computer, some super AI based. I honestly don't even know what you would use. How would you even? It's unlikely that they're gonna speak English or understand any languages of our own planet. Probably, there's all sorts of cognitive, physical, biological, biochemical differences in such species, if they exist, that even if we could communicate with them, which technically it would be possible, but because of the vast distances, anything that we would send today would take hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years to get there. So we would never have an answer back from them if they even answered back, and even assuming that there was still that species was still, that hadn't gone extinct or whatever, or hadn't moved on to somewhere of a planet or somewhere, whatever. There's just so many, like I said, it's just such a, the more you start looking into it, the more that you start kind of heading towards one conclusion or other, the more questions you start to have. It's like, I suspect the reality will be something. It'll be complex. It'll be complicated. It's not going to just be a case of life doesn't exist out there or life does exist out there. It'll be a mixed picture, probably. It's like, this. Even if we could communicate, even if it was right next door to us, it's like, what would we? How does that even work? What do you talk about? How do you express yourself to an entirely different species? It'll be akin to us trying to explain ourselves to a dolphin, or they might kind of potentially understand some sort of, maybe some body language or certain sort of very. Who knows? I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe there's. And that's to say that intelligence is necessarily an advantage on other planets. It might not be necessary for some species to necessarily go on to have to evolve that aspect. To evolve certain things that a lot of species on our planets have had to evolve in order to adapt and to survive. So there are just so many different potential outcomes and variables in this whole thing that it's virtually impossible to. All we know is that all we know for sure is that life on Earth, life in our own solar system, for the time being, is limited to Earth. We know that for a fact, that for the time being, that is. Now, of course, You know, who knows what might have been on Mars at one time, if anything, and who knows what's on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. Nobody knows for sure, but it might be nothing, or it might be something quite significant, but we'll find that in the coming decade, probably in the next 2030s, 2040s, we'll probably have some kind of an answer to that. Or certainly by the time we head towards the 2050s, 2060s, I suspect, you know, once we start having probes or whatever, some kind of like submersible go to these moons, where we can get under the ice somehow and actually explore these oceans properly. You know, that's decades away. That's not that'll probably happen by the time I'm an old man, if I live long enough. So I suspect that'll probably be something that happens within the 2040s, maybe 2050s. So, you know, by the time I'm, you know, getting on a bit, we'll certainly have a much better idea of our own solar system's history, and a bit more information about our own galaxy, and a bit more you know, more in-depth understanding of exoplanets and things like that. But that's basically the best we can hope for, really. You know, it's a shame because, like I said at the start of this video, it's one of those topics that lead you to question everything, really. You know, what if there isn't anything out there? You know, like seriously, you know, what if we never do find anything? What if we don't find anything on the moons on the gas giants in our own solar system? If we don't find any real evidence of life out there, maybe it just is extremely, unbelievably demanding for life to get going in the first place, and then for it to go into complex life, it's almost an impossibility, perhaps. You know, imagine if that is the reality of it, that you know, that complex life is so incredibly rare that, you know, imagine if that was the truth, that across the entire universe there's a handful of planets that have complex, not advanced, not intelligent life, just complex life. You know, plants, some, you know, various forms and species of plants and trees and animals or whatever. You know, ocean life, probably that might be a common. You know, that might turn out to be the most common factor on most of these exoplanets, that most life is aquatic. So, you know, we just don't know. But it's just one of those things that you can't help but think about. It's just so, you know, because it boggles the mind how vast the universe is, you know, just how vast our own solar system is, let alone the galaxy and beyond it. You know, it's the distance is just between here and the moon, you know? Just between here and the nearest planets. It's and then when you start talking about heading off into entirely other solar systems, into other galaxies, I mean, it's the stuff of, for the time being anyway, it's the stuff of science fiction, because it's just going to cost so much money. You're going to need vast amount of investment, research, testing, prototypes. You know, it's going to be a massive process of transformation, a long, prolonged period of technological evolution, decades, centuries long, before we can call ourselves a spacefaring species. And it's when you start thinking about these kind of big, fundamental questions, like, is there life out there? You know, what was before the Big Bang? You know, what led to that? You know, has there always been a universe? You know, has there always been? there's always been the conditions there for a universe to exist. You know, is our own universe in some kind of like a cyclic state? Did it come from another universe? You know, what will happen to the universe? What will happen to our species? What will happen to our planet? You know, these really existential types of questions, you know, it's philosophical, you know, very deep, you know, really meaningful questions that everybody at some point starts to ask. But we don't really have any real answers, you know. It's great to have theories and to form a hypothesis and to take a best guess kind of thing, but you know, ultimately we just don't know. We just don't have the answers to these things, and we're not gonna have the answers to them for a long time to come, I suspect. And it just leaves you. It kind of leaves you hollow in a way. It kind of leaves you. You know, just kind of, it just fills you, like I said, with this, you know, if we are alone out there, you know, imagine that. Imagine that one planet in trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of planets. Absolutely nothing. Nothing. Can you imagine? You know, there's no wonder people want to believe in religion, you know, and turn to philosophy and turn to science. You know, there's you know, it's human nature to, I think, to be curious and to ask the big questions and to want to have answers to them. Because when you look up at the night sky, you know, you can feel lonely sometimes. It can feel like a lonely world out there. You know, where are these advanced forms of life? You know, if they do exist, why aren't we seeing them? Why aren't we hearing from them? Why do we not see any evidence of them? Is it just that we live in a crap galaxy? A crap part of the galaxy? Or is it just simply the case that there's just nothing out there? Literally nothing. Maybe it's just that maybe we're the first ones, you know. Maybe other advanced forms of life became extinct, you know. Maybe there were other civilizations at one time, a few million years ago. Maybe it's just too hard for life to get going and to sustain itself long enough. You know, there's things like the Great Filter and you know, maybe there's reasons why. You know, maybe it's just simply down to technology. That's just too basic. You know, it's great. It's nice that and we should be thankful and incredibly grateful that we got this chance to live. You know, when you think about the odds of you being born and you being the person you are, and how unique it all is, and how special and kind of tragic in a way it all is, you know, and how desperately vulnerable we are as ourselves, but as a species as a whole, and how incredibly balanced our planet is in terms of its ecosystems and our atmosphere, our oceans, you know, our food sources, our natural resources and things like that. It's so incredibly, you know, it's very powerful in one way. It's very it moves you on a deeper level. You know, it makes you just makes you wonder. You know, it makes you curious about just, you know, what is there? What's out there? Is there anything? You know, and it just always comes back to that. You know, there must be something. There's got to be something out there. You know, surely it can't just be us, can it? You know, some days you kind of think to yourself, maybe it just is. Maybe that's the simple answer to that question. Are we alone in the universe? Maybe it's just as dark and depressing and as simple as that. It's just a simple answer is yes. We are. But then other days you think to yourself, well, actually, maybe it's not that simple. Maybe we have to be careful what we define as life. And will we recognize it when we see it? And maybe evolution has worked very differently for certain species, and some planets are more favourable to life than ours. Maybe we have to get away from this excessive human-centric, Earth-centric based vision of what life is going to be like on other planets. You know, if life has formed on other planets and it's evolved and grown limbs or whatever, it's, you know, basic adaptability, you know, traits, survivability traits, adaptations through natural selection or whatever the processes are on other planets, exoplanets. You know, maybe they are a lot different than we can really imagine. You know, maybe we can't comprehend what they'll be like. I don't think that if there are complex forms of life, then I don't think that they'll all, you know, be super weird and, you know, cartoonish or some kind of, you know, like something we'd see in a sci-fi movie or something, or space documentary necessarily. But, you know, who knows? You know, there's all sorts of different forms of life on our own planet, and there's all sorts of ways in which life could evolve and develop in different ways on other planets that don't happen here necessarily. So it's one of those. It might just be that we're the aliens. You know, maybe we are. Maybe we're rare, but other life forms are quite common. You know. So it might not be that life is rare. It's just that things that look like us, think like us, things that go on to have to develop tools and fire making and radios and televisions and smartphones and technology and things like that. You know, maybe that's not the best way for species to live in, for the most part, in the universe. You know, maybe we are rare, but maybe that might be a good thing. You know, maybe if maybe life is rare and there's a reason for that. Maybe it's because it's better for it to be so sparse and to be so far away from each other that there's less threats to it, kind of thing. You know, it might be the case that, you know, there's one or two in every few galaxies for a reason. Self-preservation. You know, maybe there's some kind of underlying, you know, law of physics, you know, law of the universe kind of thing that essentially means that it has to be like that. You know, maybe it's that increases the chances of survival, you know, of longevity of a planet and of its species. But then you could say, well, surely wouldn't it be better to have more of them? Yeah, in a way, but also if there's more of them, you know, it's more. If a galaxy is more packed with life in it, then it's. I mean, who knows? I mean, it could be that. Maybe it's just very fleeting. Maybe life is very fleeting. You know. Maybe it just doesn't last long enough to evolve to such an extent where it, you know, crawls out of the oceans. It goes on to develop tribes and knowledge and wisdom and skills and education, and maybe that'll happen in the future. Maybe that's where we are. We're just very early. Maybe that's why. Maybe in our own galaxy. Maybe, or maybe across the universe. Maybe it's just that we're just too early yet, and those things will flourish and come into being at a time maybe when we're long gone. You know, when our planet is basically more or less dead, kind of thing. You know, who knows? Who knows for sure? You know, I'm no scientist, so, and I'm certainly no space-based scientist, so I don't know. All I know is that, you know, at some point, you know, whether it's through climate change or through just natural disasters, or, you know, over a long enough period, or I assume our planet will, our species will either have left or been wiped out long before that. Our sun will eventually die, and so everything has a span. Even the universe has an expiry date. You know, of course, that's far into the future, but still, you know, everything has a time and a place, I guess, and, you know, maybe that's just the reality of it. It's just that maybe we're in the wrong time period of space, you know. You know, maybe we were pioneers, maybe we're the kind of prototypes, you know. Or maybe we're late to it, you know. Who knows? I mean, you know, it just boggles the mind when you really think about, you know, the time span of our planet itself, our solar system, and the universe. You just can't comprehend it. It's impossible. You know, you just can't. So maybe this is, you know, we're just in an unfortunate period of time in the universe's evolution, maybe. But like I said, you know, I think my intuition tells me that the odds are good, that there's a good chance, there's a high probability that both simple and complex life forms are out there right now existing. And the only thing I can think of really as to why we don't seem to be able to answer the question of are we alone is because I think that they're very far from each other, and they may not be very common. But even with that, you know, there's still a reason to, you know, there's still a reason to be hopeful about, you know, the potential, you know, whatever it is, you know, there's a good chance that life exists out there beyond our solar system, maybe even within it, on the moons, like I mentioned before. So, you know, there's a reason to be positive. There's a reason to be hopeful. And of course, there is a reason to be skeptical and pessimistic and cautious as well. And that's why I think people like Brian Cox are like that, and they have every reason to be. They're far more knowledgeable and intelligent, having superior intelligence than I will ever have. So you know, you tend to kind of take their word on it, kind of thing. People like that. But it does bother you sometimes. It does get to you when you think about it, and it's as much exciting as it is kind of, it kind of, it makes you feel empty sometimes when you think about it. If you think too much about it for too long, it's, what will it mean if life is out there? As in, whatever that is, what does it what does it mean for us? Where do we fit into the equation then? How does that help us? And equally, if life isn't out there, or isn't abundant out there, how do we feel about that? Where do we go from there? Is it just a case of, okay, if life doesn't exist, then we have to develop technology to terraform potentially, selective exoplanets that are deemed to have the potential to be habitable at a certain point, if we have the right technology to live in them, and the atmosphere and so forth is eventually deemed to be suitable for terraforming activities to happen. But that would take some incredible leaps in just propulsion systems, probes, and obviously we'd have to come on leaps and bounds in terms of robotic machines and things that would have to try and go there and set things up, until at some point we can, if we ever do, land on such a planet after a few, maybe a few thousand years, or if we can ever potentially reach the point of speed of light, which is, it seems, for all intents and purposes, it's probably not going to happen ever. So it would take us tens of thousands of years, if not hundreds of thousands of years, to get to some of these exoplanets at the current most fastest speeds that we can go at, as far as spacecraft are concerned. So I don't know, it's something that bothers me. It's one of those, like you, like everybody, we all want to have an answer to that. We all want to know, we all want a conclusion to it. It's kind of like a cloud that sits over your head all the time. So you just can't quite let it rest, It kind of doesn't keep you up at night, but it just makes you wonder, It makes you, just one of those things that you dwell on at times, It's like, what the bloody hell is the answer to this? What's the truth? What's the reality? What are the facts? Will we ever know? Will I know in my lifetime about these kind of things? And it's frustrating. And that doesn't mean that even if the answer to are we alone in the universe is a huge no, or it doesn't really matter so much. It doesn't really matter if we do or don't find life out there, because at least we have life on our own planet, and at least we have, at some stage, probably the potential to terraform at least Mars in the near future, and the Moon, and maybe possibly even Europa, and moons of Titan and Saturn, may possibly, but are at some point the closest exoplanets to us. Like those found in the Kepler candidates. There's quite a few that have been found. I can't remember. There's one of them. I can't remember what they call it off the top of my head now. I think it's called transit something. TRAPPIST. Sorry. TRAPPIST. There's one called TRAPPIST. What the hell do they call it? There's quite a few Kepler candidates named Kepler, and they have numbers after them. But there's also another one in a star system called TRAPPIST-1 that's been identified. I think it's got like two or three potentially habitable planets, or rather, conditions potentially that may be able to sustain some kind of life, or has the potential for habitability, or it's in the habitable zone at the very least. We think, anyway, as much as we can tell from such a incredibly massive distance away. So there's, like I said, there's reasons to not give up on this massive age-old question. There's always hope and light, maybe light at the end of the tunnel, and maybe we'll be lucky enough to one day be able to say, wow, yes, there's life out there, look what we found. Maybe it might not be what we expect, maybe it's something incredibly disheartening maybe at times, but then there'll be other things that are surprising and highly unusual, shocking, weird, and that's what I think will be the outcome of it. That's what we will find. I think it'll be a mixed bag. It'll be a combination of different things, and so because of that, I don't lose sleep about it. But of course, but you obviously have to think. You have to have a balanced approach to it as well, and you have to consider that it may turn out to be, initially anyway, it may turn out that things are just more extremely rare than we could have possibly imagined. But I think I think a lot of people would like to believe what we like to believe. We have to tell ourselves certain things, because otherwise. And that's not to say that we're wrong, but I just think as a species we have this innate kind of this need to tell ourselves, to give ourselves an answer, even though we've got no conclusive evidence about it. We've got no real research or facts to back it up. But we go on our gut instinct, go on our intuition, and but from everything that I've read and researched on this topic, it seems to me that the chances are pretty good, fairly good, fairly high, that various forms of life exist in the universe. That if I had to take an educated guess, I'd say life exists out there, but it's not what we think it will be. Maybe it'll be. I mean, look, we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to we'll see what happens over the coming years and decades. But whatever the case, I think we will get various results, and I think overall we will get some satisfying results eventually over enough time. But even if, whatever the outcome is, whatever the answer turns out to be, not that we're necessarily going to have the answer to it in a century maybe, but I suspect we might have. just remember that, you know, this is a unique experience. You know, if you're lucky, you're going to live 70, 80 years. You get one opportunity in this world, you know, and one chance to exist as you. And that's special, that matters, that's important. And, you know, our worth as a species isn't necessarily built on doesn't have to be based on whether there's life out there elsewhere, even in our own solar system. You know, of course, we all want that answer to be yes, and it might very well be yes. But, you know, we just don't know, and I think that we have to, you know, let's be grateful, let's be thankful, in a way, to not have that answer yet, and maybe potentially to not be able to discover or communicate with these species, because it may turn out possibly to be a blessing in disguise, maybe, but, you know, perhaps, who knows. You know, so really, for the time being, it's kind of up in the air. It's just unanswered. It's one of those great unknowns. And like certain aspects of our lives, it will probably remain like that for an extremely long time. But just remember that, you know, you're so incredibly lucky to have your life. You know, be curious, ask questions, you know, think for yourself, be independent, you know, educate yourself as best as you can, and, you know, dig deep sometimes and challenge yourself and confront that existential crisis, that dread that we often are confronted with, especially as we get older and start facing the reality of our mortality, and which I think probably is one of the reasons why we're so fascinated and we're so in desperate need to kind of find the answer to that big question I've been talking about throughout this. So it's because we're lonely, it's because we feel trapped in this void of darkness, this void, this emptiness, this nothingness almost, you know. Because life's hard and it's unpredictable, because of so much change and how vulnerable we are, the fleeting nature of ourselves, you know, the fleeting nature of the things we know, as we, you know, the things we loved. It's hard. It's hard to confront your own mortality. It's hard to accept that you're going to get old, you know, that your time is limited here on Earth, and that the Earth in and of itself is an extremely vulnerable place to be, you know. But yet at the same time, you know, such incredible diversity of life and opportunities, and such a special place to be in many respects. Not perfect, no, of course not. But, you know, if it is the case that Earths are quite rare, or maybe very rare, who knows, then that's even more reason to appreciate the sky, the ocean, family, food, animals, nature, you know, space. Look out there and appreciate, you know, if nothing else, appreciate the fact that you are where you are. You know, things could have been so incredibly different, and our paths could have gone in very different directions. And so does it matter whether life is out there or not? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. If we need an answer to give ourselves more of a sense of purpose and place and meaning in the cosmos, then, you know, maybe to some extent it is important. You know, whatever the the cold, hard, brutal truth of it is. Whether that's, it's just, and even if life is out there, I mean, it's quite common, doesn't necessarily mean that that's a good thing. Because we only know that we have evolved and adapted to conditions and the specific environment of Earth. You know, we as far as we know, we can't live anywhere else without spacesuits, without oxygen, without very specific equipment. So, you know, even if life is out there, like, I don't want to repeat myself, but I suspect it is. That's my gut instinct, and I mean that. I think it is out there. You know, we have to be extremely cautious and really think about what we're doing and why we're doing it. Because it might turn out that, as I titled my last video, be careful what you wish for. Because there's going to be so many complications, so many threats, so many dangers to space travel, just that in and of itself. But then getting near or getting on other worlds and then trying to terraform it, even the planned, you know, future missions to the moon and Mars and whatever, are extremely dangerous. And the tremendous amount of resources that are going to be needed for us to eventually leave our solar system, if we ever do, probably unlikely for the most part, for most of us. Who knows whatever the future is going to be, but it's certainly going to be very, very different to what it is for how things are today. That's for absolute sure. By the time I'm an old man, it could very well be that there are orbiting, you know, kind of similar things, like kind of like space stations that people can go to, and, you know, kind of moon tourism, potentially even Mars tourism, maybe at that point, you know, by more or less towards the end of the century. So, you know, there's going to be all sorts of different, you know, all sorts of challenges and difficulties as well, but so much incredible technology and advances in science, medicine, our understanding of space and our solar system. It'll be incredible, but it will also be, it may just very well turn out that we end up with just continue in the cycle of, okay, we know that now, but we've also got another 20 questions that we haven't answered. So it just may continue to kind of be an unknown thing for millennia, maybe. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on and to keep up with, as far as a hobby or an interest, or whatever you want to call it. An incredibly fascinating, deeply moving topic in many ways, and it's if nothing else, it gives you appreciation of being a human being and making the most out of your time. Don't waste your time, don't waste your life away. You know, the Earth has an expiry date. The solar system does, the universe does, and so do you. You know, make it count, make something of it, enjoy it, appreciate it while you can. Be curious, of course, but don't get too caught up in things, you know. Don't let time pass you by, and don't waste your life away. It's not worth it. It's too precious.